Chanda Dancy is the composer of Lawmen Bass Reeves on Paramount Plus. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Chanda, I wanted to start by asking you, which I ask of everybody that's worked on the show, how much did you know about Bass Reeves prior to taking the project? And what did you learn about him as you were diving into the material that really inspired the score for the piece?
I would say really my very first experience learning anything about Bass Reeves was from the HBO show Watchmen. And so I remember the little boy watching Bass Reeves Westerns and doing his capers and like catching the bad guy. And I was like, is that based on a real person? And so I like looked it up on Wikipedia and I saw, wow, this person is truly amazing. And then the whole like idea that he was possibly what the Lone Ranger was based upon, or at least partially. And so, yeah, my interest was piqued with him many years prior to the Lawman Bass Freeze project. So, and then getting involved with the project, just learning the extent of like his heroic justice. Like he even arrested his own son for for attempted murder. Or he was incredible. And to think that he was a real life person, like no one has. I don't think anyone can really write something that's bigger than real life. Well, at least without it being just so over the top and just absolutely unbelievable. But that's how he was, and I was truly fascinated. So.
Yeah, when I spoke to David, he said he was shocked that nobody had written like a John Fordian film about Bass Reeves. He's such an incredible figure. Were you inspired by any of those, kind of classic Western films? I mean, obviously, this is so unique because we're centering a Black character in a Western, which is so important and an amazing story. But did you go back and revisit any of those films and, kind of take any cues for the score from those?
Well, one thing we have to keep in mind is that the Old West and Western history and Old American history, like it's all so intertwined with Black culture that it's not necessarily like, oh, this is something different than what it was. It's one prime example is, so there's a symphony by Antonin Dvorak. Antonin Dvorak is Hungarian composer. And he wrote a symphony called the New World Symphony. And it was based on his experience in America. And the music itself was based upon three things: Eastern European orchestral music, Negro spirituals, and Native American music. And so, and you hear that, and that symphony pretty much describes America. You hear it, and it's so American in an Eastern European kind of lens. But so, going into Bass Reeves, really, my inspiration was just that, like the New World Symphony. It was how do we tell this story, a very American story, in a very big, robust orchestral way. And actually, that was my first influence, Antonin Dvorak. Now, growing up, I grew up watching Westerns. So I would say some of my favorite Western scores are Dances with Wolves, Last of the Mohicans. You And those scores are just grand, sweeping, beautiful. And it just speaks to the genre. Like Western genres just give you this huge canvas to like work with musically. And so again, like first foray into this score was Dvorak, John Barry, and things like that. So yeah, that was how it all started.
That's incredible to hear, and such an important point about the history of the Westerns. I wanted to ask you too, this is set kind of across many years in the 19th century. How does the period influence the instrumentation? Were you looking for, period appropriate sounds, or did you want to take, that time period and also bring something modern and some modern sensibility to the sound for the score?
After a bit of discussion with the filmmaking team, like speaking with Chad Feehan and Michael Friedman, and also the head editor, Christopher Gay, it was definitely, and of course, Taylor Sheridan, who was the very, very first authority upon, the sound of the show. Um, for sure, we wanted that big orchestral Dvorak, Brahms, Mendelssohn kind of sound. And so that was the first basis, the foundation of it. For sure, there were also like diegetic pieces, like the character uh, Bass Reeves' wife playing the piano and daughter playing piano, things like that, and also like in various scenes when they're in a saloon or things like that, then you'll have like some period specific like piano kind of music and things like that. And for sure, I had to research and make sure that anything that I write is very much of the period. And so those were, I would say, the only times where I was really beholden to the type of music that they played at that time. But otherwise, it was the idea of the journey of Bass Reeves, the journey of his family, and just overarching themes of humanity, overcoming adversity. And those are really big, grand ideas. And so just playing that using a huge orchestra and of course a few modern elements, like I definitely had synthesizers and things like that, but just making sure that it's true to the world that we wanted to create for this show. And so
How many pieces did you have to record this incredible score?
so in total, you'll be surprised by this number, 25 players.
Wow.
So it was not very big at all. However, with the magic of Pro Tools and and an amazing mixer, we were able to just create a legit sounding big orchestral score. We recorded in Macedonia with the Famous Project. Amazing players, and the conductor Oleg Kondratenko was amazing. So we were able, the performances were so spectacular. We were able to just make it sound bigger. So
before we dive into some of the specific tracks, take me inside those recording sessions. I mean, to hear the music that you've written for this project, to hear it brought to life by all those pieces and a conductor, what is that experience for you? Just to, I mean, obviously you're working, there's work to be done, but is it just, how emotional and how satisfying is it to hear it played by all these wonderful musicians?
It's interesting. So when I'm on the scoring stage, it's not so much, I don't feel like I have a chance to sit there and be emotional or really like sink it in. I'm so into like making sure you're expressing everything properly, making sure intonation is correct, making sure bowings are correct. I grew up playing in orchestras. I'm a violinist. So I have a tendency to go into the analytical mode and making sure the dynamics are proper and things like that. Because you have to work that hard to make sure that you get the performance that you want. Because once I go into the mix stage with my mixer, that's when I can feel the satisfaction and go, oh yeah, that feels really good to like hear those live musicians and just taking their awesome performance that we work so hard to record. And that's when I get to feel it all. So
yeah. Yeah, it must be remarkable to, have that opportunity to really appreciate it, because it came out so wonderfully for this project. Let's talk about the title theme, which is so soaring and sweeping and grand and emotional. I mean, it's such a beautiful kind of introduction to the piece and to each episode. What were you most trying to convey in that? Because obviously, out of everything that you write for a piece, this is one of the moments that will most stand out to viewers when they see those titles and hear it every episode. So what did you most want to convey in that beautiful piece?
So let's just essentially go back to what first brought that piece out of me. And so it was, I would say, about 6 or 7 months before they started shooting the show, was when Andrea von Forster, the music supervisor, approached my agent and told him, I heard the score to Devotion. I think Chanda would be great for this project. So, if she has anything that she could demo to bring this over, that would be great. And so I looked at real pictures of the real Bass Reeves on the internet, and I essentially like stared into his eyes essentially. I mean, the photos were just so striking, and you could just feel the soul behind this person. And so I wrote the main title theme looking at that picture, and what I wanted to convey was how it made me feel was prideful, very very proud of this human being, of how great he was, how adversity meant nothing. It was all about being your best person, protecting those who are weaker than you, and just the ultimate example of just strong masculinity, just which was very beautiful, nurturing, and protecting. And so this piece is like a hymn to that great figure. And so I wanted it to be something that's hummable, something that's easily singable. So, if you're driving down the street and all of a sudden hits you in the head, you're like, da, 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 da. Oh, yeah, that show. So that was pretty much the process and the inspiration. So, yeah.
Yes, lovely. I do think, everybody that I've talked to associated with the project, those photos are so powerful. And the fact that we
Yes.
actually have a few images of the real Bass Reeves is so important and so moving. So I can understand how that would inspire, that beautiful piece. The series does open during the Civil War, and we have some, and you have that incredible piece for the Battle of Pea Ridge, which is so haunting and visceral. And kind of it reminds me, like, it's very evocative to me of just like a maelstrom of, kind of emotions, and there's violence. It's very powerful visually and, sonically. Talk us through the instrumentation on that. Like, how do you approach that's, there are a lot of action sequences in this show, but that's really a huge battle sequence. So what is it like to tackle something like that?
Yeah, well, for this particular project, there was so much going on. There's cannon fire, there's limbs being blown off, there's shouting, there's screaming, there's Bass's ambivalence of being in the situation, and you have to address all of that. So, approaching it, it was important to, first of all, stay out of the way the battle sounds. there's no way I'm going to compete with cannon sounds. So there's not going to be like this bang bang while there's cannon fire going on. And so it was more like the strings growling, So that was the whole idea of just suffering, growling, like grinding your teeth, and just going through this battle. And a lot in like the lower strings, so that sonically you're able to feel out, while you have this boom boom, it's just growls underneath. And then when Bass first breaks out and he aims his gun, and you can see his amazing like marksmanship, then that's when you have like this violin that comes out almost like an electric guitar solo. So it was me on my violin, like through my amplifiers with some some distortion and things like that. And it was, again, it was more like a growl than music. And so yeah, in action sequences like this, these are very different than like a car chase or things like that, where it could be very rhythmic or kind of that kind of way. This was just all about the raw power of suffering and angst and anger and confusion. What does that sound like, kind of thing? So it's exactly what you described, just a maelstrom of like sounds and emotion. And yeah, it was a really really fun cue to do. And so that was definitely using the full orchestra. You had winds and brass, and everything was pretty much like used in a more non-traditional sense. Definitely influenced by Krzysztof Penderecki, Trinity for the Victims of Hiroshima. So, where you can have like strings and winds that can sound like alarms, or they can sound like something different than an orchestra. And so that was the process for that cue.
There's another one in that first episode that I think is so powerful, which is Bass was cheated.
Yeah.
On the run, which, oh my gosh, what an incredible piece of music for this really incredible sequence. And as you were saying, obviously different from a battle sequence. This is
Yes.
that kind of chase. You have to build momentum, build suspense, and accomplish it in this great piece. What was that like for you? Because this is a very long piece of music too. This is a
Yeah.
really long, powerful sequence. So take us inside the process of when you're seeing those dailies or whatever footage you had of David Oyelowo's incredible performance in those scenes, to bring it to life.
Oh man. So it definitely starts in the scene before with the card game. And so just playing off this head-to-head poker game that where it's the highest of stakes. And so it starts out very, very, very small, very intimate, and just playing off the movement of their eyes and the movement of the camera, and just very subtle. And it isn't until Bass starts to realize, hey, I'm getting cheated here, that we start to hear some rumblings. And then the full orchestra starts very slowly, starting with the lower strings rumbling and coming in. And then it just erupts into this fury, which is reminiscent of the Battle of Pea Ridge. So you have like this just raw emotion strings growling again, and then drums beating, and then there's this instrument called the tubax. it's like a it's like a giant saxophone, but it can play like these really weird tones that sound animalistic almost, like so that was used to pretty much just show the raw anger of being just ultimately cheated that Bass felt. And then you go into, oh crap, what what happened? I've got to get out of here. And so that's when the orchestra starts to take his journey, go along his journey. And so a lot of it is, it's very there's a lot of polyrhythms. So you can, when you have like, when you need to keep a driving rhythm, you can't just keep it the same way. It has to evolve, it has to interlock, almost like puzzle pieces that change in certain moments and things like that. And then when there are dramatic moments, like for example, when when he's saying goodbye to Jenny, he's like, I messed up, I have to get out of here. And Jenny's like, you just stay alive, I'll find you, kind of thing. And so, and then that's where we play the main theme. And then going right back into it. He's in the barn. He gets on the horse. He runs away, and you've got this dun, 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 bum, 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 kind of thing that just kind of keeps your heart racing a little bit. And so, yeah, that was a very, very important thing, to be able to just have that arc throughout that long. I mean, the sequence was about like 8 minutes. Well, the cue was 8 minutes. So, you don't want the audience to get bored. You don't want anything to sound tedious. So everything is always about changing on a dime. When something happens on screen, you see it, then the music addresses it, and it just changes like that. So it was definitely a challenge, something, you have to like pay very close attention to the drama, to the camera movement, to the picture, to what you're doing musically, making sure you're hitting themes, making sure you're driving the rhythms. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was definitely one of my favorite cues of the show. And so thank you I'm glad you enjoyed it. So thank you for your kind words.
Mine too. Mine, one of my favorites to revisit on the soundtrack. Before I let you go, Chanda, I just want to ask you, there are so many incredible characters across these episodes. Jenny Reeves, Billy Crow. I mean, just so many wonderful characters. Did you have a favorite character to score and to work with? Do you have a favorite cue, a favorite sequence to score? What most stands out to you when you look back on your work on the project?
Okay, clearly my favorite character is Bass. I mean, David O is like the most amazing actor, and it was just so satisfying doing anything for him. But also, I really enjoyed Barry Pepper's performance as our main bad guy. And he definitely has a theme that evolves into the main bad guy theme, and it's very apparent when that comes, like this lower string kind of like it's very, very creepy, and I enjoyed doing those cues for sure. So not to say that I didn't enjoy everyone else. Like, I definitely loved all of the characters, but those were my two standouts. So
Incredible. Chanda Dancy, congratulations on Lawmen, Bass Reeves. Thank you so much for talking to
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.